Good evening and welcome to an all-new edition of the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate, and tonight once again we're putting the spotlight back on the Rafale. It clearly seems to be turning out to be an albatross around this government's neck. In what could perhaps be a little embarrassing for the government today, the Supreme Court has sought details of the processes that were followed in preceding the Rafale deal. The court wants to be sure that due processes of law were followed as far as the deal is concerned. Remember, on the eve of elections, the opposition is mounting up and launching a mega attack on this deal. The government has retorted by saying they have nothing really to hide. These are strategic and security concerns due to which details are not being given. Having said that, the courts do not want to know the pricing. The courts also do not want to know the terms on which the deal has been signed. They simply want to make sure that the legal process of law or the due processes of decision, legitimate decision making were followed. It's become a huge political controversy with Rahul Gandhi to senior ministers from the government now jumping into the fray. Let's take this across to a special panel that's joining us, and as always, I rely on voices that are independent and voices that one must hear on an issue like this. Colonel Ajay Shukla joins us right here, senior journalist, strategic affairs, and somebody who's been on top of this analysis from day one. I've also got Sushant Sareen, strategic affairs expert. Nalin Kohli joins us not just in his capacity of being the BJP spokesperson, but also an advocate at the Supreme Court, and so does Mohammad Khan, who represents the Congress party here. Thank you very much, each one of you, for being with us. And Colonel Shukla, if I may begin with you, this was a political tutu-meme of sorts, counter-narrative and all sorts of allegations being made on both sides of the political spectrum. But it looks like the Supreme Court has now thrown its hat in the ring as well as far as Rafale is concerned. It wants to ensure the due processes of law were followed. It has sought details of the processes followed in a run-up to the deal. Is that a big deal, the Supreme Court intervening with this request?
Oh, well, it certainly takes out the issue from the realm of political tutu meme, as you very colorfully put it, and accurately, I might add. This name calling and mudslinging and so on will now take second place to a cold evaluation by the Supreme Court about whether the provisions of the Defence Procurement Procedure of 2015 were followed by the government when it decided to go in from a competitive procurement to an intergovernmental agreement. Now, this is now clearly within the four corners of written law. Sections 104, 105 and 106 of the Defence Procurement Procedure of 2015 lay down the conditions in which you can go in for an intergovernmental agreement. If the government has followed those conditions, and it is my understanding that that will take a stretch to be able to prove that, if the government turns out to have followed those provisions, the matter is closed. The Supreme Court is likely to say decision making was legitimate. But if it has not followed those provisions, then the government will be even further in the dock than it is right now. And then it will be in the dock not just in the court of public opinion, but in the court of the Supreme Court itself.
Yeah, I think, and that's the big worry as far as the government is concerned. But before I go across and listen into Nalin Kohli and the defense that's coming in from the ruling benches, I do want to put forward a question to the Congress party. And Mohammad Khan, you know, the Congress party seems to be hailing this as this mega victory. But the reality is that the courts have very categorically said that they just want to know whether the due process of law, legitimate decision making was done or not. They are not interested in the technical selection process or price mechanism or even awarding of the offset contract, things that you have made big controversies of, things that you have alleged of crony capitalism. The courts are not interested in that. They just need to know if the government was in the position and stuck to legitimate decision making on this. What are you claiming the victory over?
Well, Supriya, I think to say that the Congress is claiming this as a victory would be erroneous, because the Congress has no dog in the fight before the Supreme Court. The Congress has been categorical, having issued written statements to the extent that we don't believe that the Supreme Court is the appropriate forum where this issue should be raised. We have disassociated ourselves, gone to great lengths to disassociate ourselves from the busybodies who have moved these petitions, and to show the fact that this is not appropriate. Our chosen forum, which we felt was appropriate and was echoed by many experts, is the CAG. And that is the forum we went to after these people declined our request for a JPC, which we believe is the preeminent and the correct forum where this issue must be examined in detail. We are not claiming this as a major victory. We are grateful that the Supreme Court has decided to look into the matter, but we believe a thorough audit is required. A complete forensic investigation into this deal is required, because our case is not based on opinion, it is based on facts. We have moved 30 documents, annexures, before the CAG, and those documents are all available in the public domain. Just to conclude my opening point, these documents contained things such as the work share agreement signed in March of 2014 between HAL and Dassault, which they denied existed, and which Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman said that HAL was not qualified, that is why it was overlooked. A statement which was then contradicted by the former HAL chief, saying that, madam, we manufacture Sukhois, Jaguars, Hawks. We would certainly have been capable to do this. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that statement is in the public domain. We put out documents such as Dassault's annual report, where they had no compunction in disclosing the price that India paid per jet. We attached reports proving that the Cabinet Committee on Security was bypassed. That the Defence
Mohammed Khan, those documents are in public domain and one knows about those documents.
Have been brought to the attention of the CAG. Yes.
Okay, Mohammed Khan, those documents are in public domain and one knows about those documents. So I don't want you to repeat the documents that are already in the public domain. But to you, Nalin Kohli, you know, the Congress today says that they want to dissociate themselves from this. There should be a proper audit, maybe a forensic probe into this entire matter. Supreme Court is perhaps not the right forum. The reality is that your party president, Rahul Gandhi, has tweeted on this. And he has very categorically said that the Supreme Court has asked for Rafale decision-making process. It's quite simple. The Prime Minister decided and then he goes on. So I don't know if you want to wash away your hands completely from what's happening in the court right now. But Nalin Kohli, while the Congress is to be blamed on, you know, whether they are in the court or not in the court, whether they, you know, they support what's happening or not, I don't know why is the BJP being sanguine. You can dismiss it by saying that the courts have said they don't want technical details and they don't want pricing mechanism and offset clause and all of that. But the reality is that the apex court of the land and a court, you know, the bench where the Chief Justice is present wants to know whether legitimate process of law was followed. The government is now answerable. Isn't that embarrassing?
Not at all. And I think anyone who understands basic governance and basic law will find nothing embarrassing in it. There is no rocket science required that everything that the government is supposed to do is supposed to be by due process. This is, I mean, the first rule. I mean, it is not something that requires any intelligence. As far as it only, and the courts are, because our basic structure of constitution gives the court the right for judicial review. The court has made it very clear they want to see due process, that's all. There is no question in terms of the merits that were being challenged, in terms of price or in terms of what the aircraft is or its armaments, etc. It's only has due process being followed, and that's what government is supposed to do. I mean, if any government, why BJP, Congress or anything, and when the Congress didn't do due process, you had 125 licenses thrown out by the Supreme Court. So now it comes to the next issue, is that when my colleague from the Congress party, Mr. Khan, says that, you know, we didn't consider it to be the appropriate forum, that's exactly where the shoe bites them the most. It pinches the most. Because after all, at everything, the Congress and its leaders have rushed always to the Supreme Court. We want an SIT, we want an investigation, we want the Supreme Court to monitor, because courts run only on one thing, which is evidence that passes beyond reasonable doubt, and evidence that can stand the scrutiny of law. As simple as that. That is why you will notice the Congress is choosing forums where they can buy time, make allegations, mudsling. The fact of the matter is you can't manufacture a scam. If there is a scam and they have evidence, they would have rushed to the court in the first place themselves. Today you have a fantastic situation, even a joke, that the president of the Congress party is claiming credit and thanking the Supreme Court, and the Congress party itself is disassociating itself from the court and calling them busybodies. You can't be running with the hounds and hunting with, running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. So I think this tells you everything. The government will answer, absolutely, but there is no notice to the government on that sense. It's on due process, and I'm sure the government will come clean.
I just wish the government was far more open about this entire conversation. We perhaps wouldn't have landed up here. But I think to a larger point that this is not embarrassing. You know, like I disagree with the Congress, I also disagree with you. The courts want to know if a legitimate decision making happen. You know, clouds of doubt are being raised on that. But Sushant Sareen, to be the devil's advocate, the Supreme Court doesn't want to get involved with technical details. The Supreme Court also doesn't raise questions on pricing. The Supreme Court also doesn't talk about the offset clause, which is really the big crux of the controversy right now. Crony capitalism, you know, HL being thrown out, Reliance being brought in and all of that. If the Supreme Court is not going to do all of that, and if the Supreme Court is simply going to say it wants to satisfy itself whether legitimate decision making preceded this deal, then what is this big fuss all about?
No, look, if you're being the devil's advocate, I would agree with the devil. Actually, the simple fact, to my mind, look, I'm not a legal expert, but I found this entire proceedings today in the court somewhat strange. As of now, there is an insinuation or allegation of some wrongdoing. There's no proof. I find it very touching, the faith which has been placed on Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. I find that very touching because everybody knows the sheer incompetence of that organization, especially in manufacturing state-of-the-art jets. But put that aside. I wonder whether this is a kind of an encroachment into the domain of executive decision making. If there was a solid allegation, if there was a smoking gun, there was some kind of evidence or proof of some kind of wrongdoing, should the courts have intervened, and are they now going to interfere in executive decision making just because two busybodies, as somebody spoke about, decide that they are going to go and file a petition? If will every single negotiation or deal which the government undertakes be put through this kind of a scrutiny, in which case it already takes us 15 years to procure something, it will start taking us 150 years. I think this is a theatre of the absurd and it needs to be avoided. Now, if the Supreme Court felt that there was some wrongdoing, then why have they not said that we will examine the pricing, we will examine other things? But is that the competence of the Supreme Court to decide whether a particular jet serves India's purpose best or some other jet serves? Is the Supreme Court now going to start taking decisions which ideally the Defence Ministry or the government needs to take? Are they going to interfere in that as well? And from my point of view, I see very, very disturbing parallels with what I see in our neighbouring country, Pakistan. This is precisely the way the Supreme Court started entering into the political domain, into decision making, and okay, the Supreme Court Chief Justice out there right now has gone completely bonkers, right. But I really wish there is greater judicial restraint which is shown to taking over matters which are essentially political in nature, and there is, as of now at least, there is no real evidence of any wrongdoing.
Fair point. I think the operative word is as of now, but I think your point is very well taken.
Comment to add to what Sushant is saying in terms of how
you draw the line between executive decision making. I'm just coming. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Nalin Kohli, very quickly, because I think I agree with the judicial restraint.
Sushant made a point. It's important.
Make your point quickly, because I have a very specific question for Colonel Shukla there.
Yeah, sure. But, I think what Sushant is saying, I think we need to understand, this is actually a case where a petition has come. The petition, till notice is issued, this is not even really at an admitted stage. It's at a preliminary stage, only on due process. Now, judicial review of due process is part of it, because the government cannot be beyond the process or dump the process. So that's why I said it's not embarrassing. Notice what I mean if they saw more merits to it. Second is, Sushant is correct. The court in this case, and in all fairness to the court is not asking for a review on the decision making in terms of the merits of the case vis-a-vis the selection of an aircraft, which is what has come out in the media. Because I haven't seen and the order is not detailed, obviously, it's a preliminary order. But it's, more about if the process is
let me just go across to, all right.
In terms of what is the price, etc. and all that, because there are multiple factors.
Fair point. Okay, Nalin Kohli, give me a minute, because I want to step in and take this debate to the other big argument that there is, and the courts, you know, have taken cognizance of that, because they could have well dismissed these pleas. They did not do that. I mean, I just want to clarify here. Colonel Shukla, the deal was announced when Mr. Modi travelled to Paris in, in April 2015. The Cabinet Committee on Securities gave an approval on the 24th of August 2016. A month later, on the 23rd of September, the deal was actually inked and signed. Technically, the Cabinet Committee on Securities gave an approval after the deal was announced in France. Is that a big deal? Because that is also that is the crux of the matter today. At what stage was approval taken? And if I may also get a quick clarification here, my understanding is that defense procurement procedure doesn't make it mandatory for intergovernmental deals to be cleared by the CCS, and you rightly pointed out that this deal from being a competitive deal became intergovernmental when Mr. Modi announced it in France. So two big questions there.
I'm going to answer your question, but one quick issue before that. I'm not sure what Sushant is getting into a lather about, because the Supreme Court has been extremely restrained in what it is actually bringing into its own ambit. It has decided not to go in for the technical and commercial details and is only going in for decision making, and that is completely in line with the Supreme Court's mandate to not get involved in judging cases that have already been judged, but into looking at procedural aspects. So it's only going to look at the procedure. Now, coming to the question that you asked, Supriya, there are two dimensions to this. One is the clearance that has to be given by the CCS. And in an intergovernmental agreement, a clearance is required by the CCS. Let me be categorical on this. But the other more important aspect, and that is what is going to come in between the BJP, which the BJP will have to explain to the Supreme Court, is what were the conditions that led it to go in for an intergovernmental agreement. And the Defence Procurement Procedure of 2015 actually lays down 3 specific conditions when an intergovernmental agreement is permissible. So the government will actually have to put in that sealed cover to the Supreme Court the rationale and which of those 3 conditions it actually met in order to decide to go in from a competitive procurement, including a large component of Make in India, to an intergovernmental agreement that has no component of Make in India. The government has got its task completely clearly cut out. It has to answer no questions about 1,500 crore aircrafts versus 500 crores. All of that is out of the game now. That will be judged by the CAG. With the Supreme Court, it just has to prove one thing. Did it meet one of those 3 conditions in the Defence Procurement Procedure? And number 2, was that CCS sanction given appropriately and in time and at the proper juncture?
Okay, so I think one thing is clarified, because I wasn't sure about this before the debate began, that does the defence procurement procedure needs to kick in even for an intergovernmental deal, and to that your larger point is yes, and the government, and it really now all boils down to whether the process was followed, why was competitive bidding changed to contract. But to the Congress, if I may, I was given to understand that the defence procurement procedure policy of 2013 had said that the competent financial authority needs to clear it, and which is why questions of political opportunism are being raised as well. Even as you say you don't agree with the courts today, and this should be done by the CAG. What is your bigger grouse? Is your bigger grouse whether due process law was followed, or is your bigger grouse how HAL was thrown out and how a private operator was brought in? Because politically speaking, that serves a larger purpose, right? Because you're going to now level charges of crony capitalism, which you in any case are. So I'm just trying to understand from the Congress party's point of view, in the list of priority on how you're attacking this deal, what is more prior? Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yeah, absolutely. Supriya, to answer your question, let me first distill this into its most basic elements, right? We are buying under Narendra Modi ji fewer jets for 3 times the price. That was where this dispute began. We found this out because Dassault published its report. The defense minister at the time did not even know about this, Mr. Manohar Parrikar. He was busy inaugurating a fisheries project, and he is on record claiming that he had no knowledge of this. Number 2, let me distill it for Mr. Kohli and his colleagues into its three simplest forms. You have replaced an experienced company with over 70 years of experience with someone whose company was established 15 days before. He has no qualifications other than a proximity to the Prime Minister and writing lovely letters on his birthday to him. Number two, you have lied consistently and you have been caught out by two of the highest office bearers in France. You claimed in the floor of parliament that there's a secrecy clause that prevents you. Macron comes to India, gives an interview to a channel and says, no, you can share it with the opposition if you like. He
Mohammed,
is on
what
television
is your priority
this. No matter,
in
no amount of spin will change that. But the bigger revelation, Supriya,
yes,
the bigger revelation for us was when Mr. Hollande came out and said, we didn't choose the offset partner, we were given the offset partner by the government, a lie that they had maintained for over a year, saying that the decision was never theirs.
So
of
in
course,
your
corruption
list
is a primary issue because this is the Prime Minister who said, na khaunga, na khane dunga.
Okay.
So of course, we have to expose him for who we have to expose this government for what it is. Number two, of course, these procedures have been violated.
Okay.
And it is not simply a question of procedural violation, it is a question of arrogance. And let me tell Mr. Kohli, and I'll conclude on this, Mr. Kohli, you spoke about due diligence and due process. I'm reminded of something Sardar Patel Sahab said to Pandit Nehru once. He said that, sir, we are now faced with a constitution. Every executive action must have legal sanction. It is a worthy lesson to remind yourselves no matter how many seats you claim you got in parliament. It doesn't exonerate you or allow you to advocate the duty towards the constitution.
Okay. All right. Mohammed Khan, I'm going to come in there. I'm going to come in there because according to you, your primary objective and your priority is to level charges of corruption. On that ground, this isn't a great day. Yes, Nalin, yes. Nalin Kohli, I will let you respond to that, but I also have a question of my own and may I please bundle that in. While hearing was going on, KK Venugopal, who represents the government in this case, as AG said, these political interest petitions are filed on the eve of elections when the government and the opposition are locked in a bitter fight over the Rafale jet deal. Is it right for the government of the day to bring in electoral politics onto India's largest defense deal?
I'll come to your question later. Since Mr. Mohammed Khan invoked my name and also the Prime Minister by saying, na khaunga, na khane dunga, just to remind him, the Prime Minister doesn't have a brother-in-law who dealt with an arms dealer and was flying business class with him to Zurich. So therefore, just let's get the records clear.
Let's do this
and you do know I'm referring to Mr. Robert
problem.
Vadra and Mr. Sanjay Bhandari. The second part is, no, one minute.
Let's answer. Let's stick with Rafale, gentlemen.
May I have the courtesy of saying something without interruptions? Otherwise, I'm happy to leave the show.
Okay, one second. Mohammed Khan. Okay, Mohammed Khan, please wait. Let Nalin Kohli, you spoke. Let him rebut your argument. I will come back to you if you want to make a counter argument. Go ahead, Mr. Kohli.
So my first point was just to remind Mr. Khan and the Congress party that the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, does not have a brother-in-law who deals with an arms dealer and took free business class upgrades to travel to Zurich. That's all also in the public domain. The second is when the Congress speaks on a script, they forget that the truth does not necessarily have to have a script. The truth comes from conviction. Mr. Rahul Gandhi's speeches are also in public domain where the figure changes according to the place where he's standing. The Rafale deal is hundreds and doubles and triples of this. Let me just bring the facts down. It was $80 million or euros if I'm not euros when the Congress was negotiating for 136 jets. With the price escalation clause, the price should have been $100 million, 100 million euros.
Go to the pricing
that
debate.
Has been now finally negotiated at 90 million euros, which is 10% less. 1 minute, hold on. Because these hundreds and thousands, we are not speaking in air, I'm giving you the figures. That's well known. Number 3 is the breakup of that. The government has said repeatedly we can't give it because it involves giving out what the armaments are. Number 4 is about the Hindustan Aeronautical Limited. In terms of it, 10 years of the Congress party, the Sukhoi is still behind schedule and so is the Tejas. So that's the question which Sushant was pointing out. I'll let him speak on defense matters or Ajay because that's not my domain expertise. The fourth point is with regard to the Congress party saying that, a scam is here. The government should answer. The government has clearly said it will. When they bring the name of President Hollande, then let's not forget there was a national embarrassment when they drew in the last president to say, I had a conversation with him. That's the Congress president saying so. And what happened after that? It almost put Indian-French relations in jeopardy. And you had everyone denying that conversation, which reportedly
we're getting lost in semantics here.
Gandhi and Mr. Macron. So then the last point, my last point.
Nalin Kohli, we are getting lost in semantics.
I'm just simply giving back answers to the to the baseless things that are coming. I'm not, madam. If the Congress party spokesperson doesn't have specifics on facts, he's going to get back political answers. He's not going to get facts. Now the last point is with regard to the AG. So I'll give you a concrete example from
Nalin Kohli,
the Supreme Court. Vyapam.
Right.
Mr. Digvijay Singh and no, hold on, 1 minute. You have to, madam, you have to understand this. You can't, you see, point is you can't get an answer of how you like it, ma'am. You ask the questions, I'll answer it. In Vyapam, they kept saying we want an SIT, we want a CBI probe.
Okay,
Mr.
answer my question. Answer my direct
please
question
give
on
a
AG.
CBI probe. I would like it so that my name is cleared. And what was it? So therefore, this is what it is. The example of whether it is Vyapam, whether it is now Rafale, these are politically driven petitions. They are not driven by any facts. If they had the facts, they would have gone to the court, not the CAG.
Okay, you know, the reality is that you have, your colleagues have, many people in the government have given out figures on Rafale. I wonder why the government cannot have a one-on-one with the opposition and share those numbers. It will put a lid on this controversy. My only point as a journalist and as a well-wisher is perhaps that. But Sushant Sarina, I will quickly ask you a question. Offset clause are in a sense hand-holding by foreign OEMs to ensure that Indian companies leapfrog into the state-of-art defense. This is not happening here, sir. As far as manufacturing and then the new negotiated contract is concerned, there is no big make in India happening. There is no great, state of the defense that's going to take off. So in some sense, I know the political class should take the blame because this issue has been politicized. But the reality also is that this deal hasn't turned out to be the way it should have. I'm with you on judicial restraint, but please help me understand how does this benefit defense manufacturing in the country?
You know, I think it's a much more complex issue. I don't think I'll be able to do justice to it just yet, but I think it's very important for us to understand, do we have companies that can absorb the kind of technology even with hand holding, which is sought to be brought out here and be put under Make in India? I think we'll have to use this opportunity in a stage-wise basis, and gradually people will rise up the value chain and the food chain and start developing more complex stuff. That is one. The second part of it is that I don't hold a brief for Reliance Defense or any other company, but the issue is that most of these companies are not manufacturing the Rafale jet. They're not going to be manufacturing the jet. They're only going to be manufacturing some components, and under the offset clause, it is not really specified that what parts or what kind of technologies have to be transferred. And finally, I think it is extremely important for all our politicians and everybody else to understand that nobody in the world transfers state-of-the-art technology. You either develop technology on your own or you steal it. There is no other third way of getting technology. Nobody will give you technology on a platter, and even if they were to give it to you, you can't absorb it. So much of what HAL does, which we call manufacturing jets, is basically they are assembling jets out here. They are not manufacturing anything, and it's only licensed production. So our production base of making fighter aircraft or any kinds of aircraft is extremely limited, and I think we need to be clear about that fact as well.
Okay, very quickly then, Ajay Shukla, as an expert, will let you have the quick last word on the show, but please make it brief. Amidst all of this, within the, from the political tutu meme to mudslinging, to name calling, now to the Supreme Court stepping in, where does this leave India's defense preparedness? I mean, who's talking about that? I'm wondering, should the Supreme Court begin talking about that next, and will it?
Yeah, I think that there is a complete lack of clarity in defense procurement procedures, defense production procedures, and governments expend so much time and effort doing their, their daily give and take and sort of fighting on television channels and so on. The Congress is as guilty of it as the BJP, the Samajwadi Party as guilty as the BSP. None of these politicians have ever seriously sat down and said, let's all sit down together, let's produce a code of conduct of how we are going to react to procurements. Let's produce a procurement methodology that actually can be implemented in the time frame that is laid down, and let's make sure that we work together in this aspect, and let's keep our fight and our bickering and our sort of day-to-day politics out onto other realms. There's no shortage of other realms where they can fight and where they can clash over political issues. But this doesn't seem to be on the agenda of any political party. This is not on the agenda even now. The Rafale sort of scam will blow over. But at the end of it, you'll be stuck exactly where you started off with, which is a defense procurement procedure that no bureaucrat is willing to stick his neck out and do, because he knows that he's going to come under political attack by the Congress or the BJP or whichever company or whichever party happens to be in opposition, and you're back with, where you started from. This is a sad state of affairs.
Yes.
Can I just add something? Can I just
Oh
say
yes,
one
it
line?
is a sad state of affairs, but I think all eyes will now be set on what the government tells the courts and how much, I'm sorry, I've really run out of time here, and how much of that is going to be scrutinized by both the opposition, us in the media, and experts like yourselves. But thank you very much for putting this debate in perspective and in context. Nalan Kohli, Mohammad Khan, Ajay Shukla, and of course Sushant Sareen for joining us on this edition of the India Development Debate. Thank you very much for being with us. Up next is a fascinating conversation with Vivi Reddy, and that's coming up in just a bit. India's former RBI governor takes questions on the rupee, the weakness, and of course ILFS. Where has the government landed itself into? Is the RBI focusing on ILFS the right thing to do, or should it be scanning LIC and SBI instead?